individuals who make great contribution to the eventual freedom and democracy of China. Now, first thing I would like to say is I'm always puzzled by two iconic statements about the nature and the scope of the Tiananmen movement. First one is called student-led Tiananmen movement. It was led by the students, but they inspired the nationwide uprising against tyranny. So Tiananmen was obviously the center, but you go back to refresh your memory, you will see in every major metropolis in China or in a major countryside region, there were Tiananmen-like movement. So let's just not forget about that. Secondly, we like to focus on this iconic moment in history that shows great bravery of ordinary citizens. The most iconic image, obviously, was the tank man. Tank man was an individual. He was the symbol of the spirit of Chinese people. And here's what I'm going to say. I think we need to have a rectification of names. Zhengmin. That is, it is not an act of one particular individual, one particular group of people. They might be a vanguard of the popular movement, but it is a nationwide resentment, revolt against communist dictatorship. You cannot say, you can say the same thing about 1956 Hungarian uprising. You can say the same thing about 1968 Prague Spring in the Soviet bloc. So this is a very important point because when I was in the government, whenever we bring up the issue that the Chinese government and Chinese people are not the same, they always cite some kind of ridiculous surveys, 95% of Chinese people were endorsing Chinese Communist Party. I said, well, how about you explain the 1989 Tiananmen movement? They couldn't. They cannot, because it's Chinese government versus Chinese people. There has never been a moment in modern Chinese history when the fundamental confrontation between the interests of the party and the interests of the people so revealed, so clear. So that's one point. Second point I was going to say is, I would like to share with you, is the illusion that somehow a reformed communist regime can lead China to a bright future. It's never happened. It could never happen because Tiananmen is a very good example to prove to the world that even the most reform-minded leader of Chinese Communist Party, the architect of reform and opening up, 改革大师, would never spare a moment of time in ordering the massacre of his own people. So it's always a mystery to me why in the world do we still have to pin our hope for a bright future of China on a kinder and gentler communist. So that illusion should have been gone a long time ago, because it is the institution, it is the system that created people like Deng Xiaoping, like Hu Yaobang, like other people. So there is institutional limitation to those sort of things. So that's my second thought that I'd like to share with you. Third issue is this. In the US government, there's always this hope that somehow, if Xi Jinping is gone, US-China will be much improved. After all, the worst part of the US-China relationship took place in the last 10 years also, when Xi Jinping was in charge. This was also erroneous. If we don't understand the true meaning of Tiananmen movement, we would have erroneous understanding of that sort. It's a wishful thinking, because we don't want to return to the pre-Xi Jinping era, because pre-Xi Jinping era, that would also include Tiananmen massacre. Deng Xiaoping was right when he said the Tiananmen movement was instigated by the international mega climate, 国际大气候. He was right, but it was not a conspiracy. It was a mega climate of pro-democracy movement, the same pro-democracy movement that brought down communist systems in the Soviet bloc. So unfortunately, Tiananmen movement inspired global uprising against communist system, but it did not succeed in its origin, place of origin in China. So I'm so inspired by all you guys, and so the road to freedom and democracy in China is long, but we should all be hopeful, because the fact that we're still here 33 years, and to do every bit of whatever we can, and it should give us hope. And thank you very much for including me into this event.
Next, I would like to invite Wei Jingsheng to the stage. We all know Wei Jingsheng is Chinese human rights and democracy fighter. He's the president of the Wei Jingsheng Foundation. Moreover, he famously authored the essay, The Fifth Modernization. He was sentenced to jail twice for a total of more than 18 years due to his democracy activities.
Sorry, I didn't have to quite prepared.
大家英语都讲得很好，我也不会讲英语，只能通过翻译了。
And all you guys speak good English, but not me, so I have to use a translator.
最近咱们今年64，咱们说有一种64精神或者89精神，但是呢，网上有很多人在那说，64没有什么精神，64就是耻辱，中国人的耻辱。
So we are in commemoration of the June 4th massacre, and then we are talking about spirit of June 4th, a spirit of 1989, and there was some debate on the internet to say, what about June 4th? It's just a shame on us.
64确实是个耻辱，那是共产党屠杀人民的一个巨大的耻辱。
And yes, indeed, the June 4th is a shame on us. It's a shame that the Chinese Communist regime massacred its own people.
人家说，那你们纪念什么呢？我要说，我们纪念的是那些英勇牺牲的烈士的精神。
So then we say, people will ask, what are you commemorating for? Then I will say, we are making commemoration of those martyrs whose spirit will stay with us.
敢于拿自己的生命，不是为自己的利益，而是为人民的全国的利益去拼死斗争，这是一种精神，一种很高尚的精神。
They use their lives to make a sacrifice for the benefit of the people, all the Chinese in the whole country, not for their own benefit. This is a very high moral.
89年以后，共产党和他的宣传机器，包括一些知识分子配合，就在拼命的宣传，说这个宣传一种精致的利己主义，说民主那东西能当饭吃吗？
And after 1989, the Chinese Communist regime has been propagating, along with their assistants, to say something. Say, what about democracy? You could use democracy for dinner, and that was kind of promoting you only serve for yourself.
但是人除了吃饭，还有很多的东西，自由、获得尊严、自己的权利，这些都是人必须的东西。
But the people who's living not just to eat, they also have their freedom, their dignity, all those moral values.
没有了自由，没有了基本的权利，只知道吃饭，那人和猪狗有什么区别呢？
Well, without a sense of freedom, you only cared about to eat. Then what's the difference between human and dogs and pigs?
从江泽民时代开始，他们就开始宣传这一套东西。那么64以后，他们宣传的更厉害了，有很多无耻的知识分子也配合他们宣传，这个对中国人的影响非常大。
It has been so since the Jiang Zemin time. After 1989, the June 4th massacre, there was also some Chinese intellectuals cooperating with that. that's really a damage to the Chinese people.
我在网上看到有些记者，打电话到那儿去采访，说啊，现在的中国人都已经不关心民主了，年轻人只知道吃喝玩乐。我想你一个记者从外国打电话来，谁也不知道你是什么人，人家怎么敢跟你说真话呢？
And there were some reporters from a foreign media would call people inside China and ask them. And then they'll say, oh, now Chinese do not care about democracy and freedom, and they do not want it. But my question is, when you call from overseas, how dare the Chinese people to speak out of their mind?
20多年来，我在大街上经常被人家认出来，然后我戴上墨镜，人家说你戴着墨镜，我们也认识你。然后他们对我表达的都是很支持中国的民主，希望中国人也能有自由。没有人说我不关心中国的民主了。
For more than 20 years now, I would be recognized by people on the street, even if I wear sunglasses, and they'll recognize me, and then they'll come to me and to say they support the democracy in China. Nobody says that they do not support the democracy in China.
我不能打电话回国，我怕连累大家，连累别人。但是从我的推特上看，一多半都是年轻人或者中年人在支持民主，在要求自由，甚至那个强烈的程度一点不比我们差。
I cannot make a phone call to China because I do not want to cause them trouble inside China. But if you read my tweets, you will see there were so many Chinese support democracy and freedom. Many of them are young and middle-aged people. They are just support democracy as we were back before, and maybe they are even stronger.
里边有一半的推特上的那个人管我叫魏爷爷或者魏叔叔，说明他们都是很年轻的人，但是他们很尊敬这些为了民主争取，为了中国的民主，做出牺牲的人。
And those people would call me Grandpa Wei or Uncle Wei, so that indicates their age. But you could see how much they respect the people fighting for democracy and freedom in China.
我们现在做的事情，正是要为中国的人民注入这种敢拼死为了自由斗争的精神。
So now what we are doing is to inject the Chinese people with this spirit that they will die for freedom, this kind of spirit.
中国需要这种精神。
China needs this kind of spirit.
谢谢。
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Mark Kifo to share his speech with us. Mark is the president of Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong. I'm also on the board, and previously he was the executive director of the Hong Kong-based Asia Business Council, editor-in-chief of South China Morning Post.
Well, thank you very much, Wang Don, Ambassador Bromberg, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I mean, so many heroes from Tiananmen, I feel quite humbled to be here. 3 years ago, I was in Victoria Park in Hong Kong with 160,000 other people commemorating the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen killings. And I couldn't have imagined that 3 years later, so many of my friends and colleagues in Hong Kong would be in jail. And that's why we started the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong. I was on the board of Next Digital, which published Apple Daily, which I think many of you know was a pro-democracy newspaper. And I now have 7 of my colleagues in jail. Jimmy Lai, editor-in-chief. Jimmy was the founder, of course. And I think that, you know, it feels very dark right now with Xi Jinping, but on the other hand, I think as some of the other speakers have said, the contradictions are mounting, and I think the scales are falling from the world's eyes, and I think people see the true face of the communist China regime, the face that I think many of you have known for many, many decades. And I think that technology and the fact that so many of us have been forced out of Hong Kong into the diaspora gives us new possibilities. And so I wanted, with the help of my colleague in the back, Colleen, I'm going to show a brief video about some of our the way we're trying to draw attention internationally to June 4th, because I think June 4th now is becoming not just a commemoration of what so many of you suffered in Beijing 33 years ago, but it's becoming a day when all of us can remember and commemorate all the victims of Chinese communism, the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, Southern Mongolians, the Han Chinese, of course, and the people of Hong Kong. So let me just show just a 1-minute video. This was Tuesday night in London. This is the London Tower Bridge. To say, because I'm so honored to be here. The fight goes on. We're into a new chapter, and let's see where we are next year. You know, this won't last. I'm old enough to remember the Berlin Wall going up. I lived in Berlin in 1980, 81, and of course I saw the wall come down. And I think the fight goes on with people like you. I'm confident that freedom, liberty, justice will prevail, because as Mr. Wei said, I mean, people aren't animals. You know, we live by more than bread and rice alone. We live for freedom and justice and truth. And I'm just honored to be part of this and be here at the opening of the museum on this important day. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for this so powerful support. Last but not least, I would like to invite my good friend,吾尔开希to the stage. You all know in 1989 he was also one of the student leaders, and now is serving as the General Secretary in the Taiwan Parliamentary Human Rights Commission. Okay.
Friends, it's it's a good feeling to feel being among friends. Now we're among friends. This is our congratulations to the exhibition. Every year when we come to June 4th, when we commemorate these days in the last 33 years, we use a Chinese idiom called 时光飞逝, time flies. Time flies when you say, okay, it's already been 33 years, but what happened 33 years ago, very much vividly in our memory, therefore, yes, time too flies. But it doesn't. It doesn't fly for those who are still counting for the days that they can pay their respect to the fallen loved ones. For Tiananmen martyrs, time didn't fly. They have been counting every day, every hour, every minute in the last 33 years. Time didn't fly for them. Time didn't fly for many of the democracy activists who have been thrown into prison. Time didn't fly for Jiang Jielian, for those who stayed in their age in 1989. Time did not fly for them. Time didn't fly for, well, if time flies, how can we still having this Chinese Communist regime who committed this atrocity and still being in power? Time didn't fly for me. I have been living in exile for 33 years and hoping one day that I can go back to Tiananmen and then pay respect to those who perished way too young for their dreams. And then I was hoping that one day I can go home and embrace my ailing parents and tell them I'm sorry for putting you through this. But 33 years I have been waiting for that moment and it didn't come. It's a very, very painful, long time that didn't fly. 80s, the decade of the 1980s it's a hopeful time that gave us, the Chinese students, hope to took the street and say, okay, you promised us open and reform. We want you to fulfill that promise. We demand that. That's the true nature of 1989 student movement. And that movement, we were naive. We students were naive. We took the street actually hopeful. You see the image of this, and then of course today is a commemoration day of a massacre. But before that day, the spirit in Tiananmen Square on the face of my fellow Tiananmen student the whole generation was hope. It was hope. We had hope. Hope is a mighty powerful force and drive you to take the street, to go through hunger strike. And then it spread the spirit of 1989 to more than 400 cities in China. And then it spread across border to Berlin, to Romania, to Eastern European countries. And then that consequently ended the Cold War. Like Motion, my friend Miles just reminded us. We were the vanguard of a great campaign that should be written down in the history of the 20th century, but it failed in the original place of that campaign. We were the pioneer. We were the sacrificing pioneer. Much have changed in the last 33 years. And well, we see the ending of the Cold War, but also much haven't changed. We're still having the Chinese Communist regime ruling this country. And then from that day on, from the June 4th, one thing changed is that we no longer have hope for Chinese Communist Party. But then much hasn't changed. We see after Tiananmen, the world seems to still hold on the hope to Chinese Communist Party. We feel betrayed in 1989, in the day of June 4th. You promised us political reform. We were demanding that, and then this is your answer. That's how we feel. That's how much we feel betrayed. But then, in the last 33 years, the feeling of betrayal is still there because the support we had during those 50 days in Tiananmen from all over the world didn't translate into a force to help end who conducted this massacre stay in power. The world stayed in the same business. Went parade to Beijing to sign a trade deal. And there's three assumptions. The first assumption is, well, okay, if we keep doing business with China, we're going to make China give birth to a capitalism, enrich China. We'll give birth eventually to a huge middle class, and then give birth to a civil society, and then give birth to democracy. That's the first assumption. At best, I call it naive. And then the second assumption is, well, okay, yes, we know we are enabling a Chinese totalitarian regime. There will be consequences for that, but the consequences perhaps will be within the Chinese border. Yeah, we know what's happening in Tibet, but in the longer run, the world may benefit from this trade-off. This kind of assumption, at best, I call it selfish. And then the third assumption is the really problematic assumption. That is, engaging China will bring China into a position that we can deal with rationally. Will make China become one of the responsible members in the global community. This assumption, at best, well, it's a downright stupid. There is no other word that I can find to describe it. But the world have been operating based on these three assumptions, and all of them were wrong. None of these assumptions came true. And then the world nurtured a high-tech totalitarian regime. that become the threat of the very civilization we have accomplished many hundreds of years. And then I hope with the sacrifice of Uyghur people, millions of them in the internment camp, I hope the brave fight of the Hong Kongers on the street, I hope many, many years of what we, the Chinese dissidents, been telling the world this, we want our freedom just like the freedom that you are enjoying. The rights defender, I see that Chen Guangcheng is among with us today, and we hope that his story can inspire the world to realize that what we want is the same. Stop that illusion. Stop that operate based on a false assumption. So 33 years later, we're here, joining this commemoration. And it's a painful day, of course. It's a dark day. But I would also want to point out that from that day on, an exhibition, an alliance of exhibition has been formed. When I first came in and I said friends, we are among friends. I'm among with a lot of great friends. I will first want to congratulate Mondan for putting together this show. 30-some years of long friends, Xu Guang, Feng Suo, Da Hai, Heng Qing, Jin Yan, all these friends. I mean, we are commemorating the loss, but we are also celebrating the forming of a fellowship. Continue for us to fight for the dream that started 33 years ago. And then I'm glad this fellowship is growing. Ambassador Bremberg, Piero, I'm so happy that we have you, Christina, and all the friends in this room join this fellowship. This fellowship is glamorous. We're fighting for the dreams of those who have fallen 33 years ago. In a very simple concept, very simple word, it's freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, President. I think as you all know, you all can see from that day to today, we are still here. Kaixi, me, Heng Qing, Feng Suo, and others, all the Tiananmen veterans, we are still here. We will never forget. We will never give up. Finally, I want to say, based on the exhibit, our next mission is to build the June 4th Massacre Memorial Museum in New York, so that we can hold on to our historical memory and not forget those who paid their lives for the pursuit of democracy. This is not only an act of resistance against totalitarianism, but also a demonstration of our responsibility to history. On behalf of the preparation committee, I would like to call to all of you here, all friends who wish to hold on to this historical memory should participate in this historical project. Those with money can